Dr. Jason Shirley is the General Manager at ECP, Energy and Chemical Professionals. Now, an experienced risk engineer, Dr. Shirley possesses extensive knowledge of the present and future challenges encountered by the energy companies. Now, his risk management expertise is comprehensive, as one might expect, and he aims to equip his clients with cutting-edge strategies, resources, and methodologies. Today, he's going to be joining us on stage to talk specifically about new risk management trends for downstream energy. Dr. Jason, welcome to the stage. Hello, sir.
How are we all doing this morning? Pretty good party last night. A lot of energy, celebrating the conference. So for me today, this is what it's all about, talking about the future trends. We're certainly at an interesting crossroads in our industry. Yeah, we're at an interesting crossroads in our industry. Various challenges of going forward into the future. So I'm going to talk to you about some of those challenges from a risk perspective. New risk management trends for downstream energy. We in this room take great responsibility in terms of ensuring that we've got the right mix of fuels going forward to drive the energy for our countries, for business growth, that we provide the right nutrients to put into the ground to grow our crops, to feed our populations. And we've got immense challenges ahead of us in terms of climate change, in terms of technology. So we'll briefly touch on some of these topics. So in terms of myself, as a brief introduction, I'm Jason Shirley. I'm a risk engineer based in Dubai. And I've had the privilege to visit numerous energy installations within Pakistan. And not only to gather information for the benefit of underwriting, for insuring your facilities, but also with the attempt of adding some value to look to avoid losses and to improve your overall risk quality. This talk is about looking forward into the future, into future risks. But you can't do that without looking at the present and learning from the past. So in terms of the first part of this presentation, I was going to talk to you about the current state. So as a risk engineer, visiting energy installations within the region, the task of an energy risk engineer is to ultimately formulate an opinion on a facility. Insurers, underwriters, they want to write good risks. So they need to understand what are the challenges, what are the risks associated with a certain facility. And inside those types of risks, they can be broken down into hardware, management systems, location, and ultimately paint a picture, build an impression of your facility. So risk engineering is a lot about data gathering. It's about asking lots of questions. It's about looking at the hardware of the facility. It's about reviewing a lot of the documentation for the benefit of the assessment of the risk quality of your facilities. This is quite a famous slide. It's used quite a bit within the risk engineering community. And it's to break down some of these topics, some of these features of energy installations, and to categorize them in terms of what are the most important, what have the highest impact on a site's risk quality. So at the top, what we see is that asset integrity is one of the most important topics for an energy installation, keeping the hazardous materials inside the pipes, keeping the hazardous materials inside the vessels. This is effectively process safety, that maintaining primary containment. Within the energy industry, if you have a release from pipes or vessels, this will then lead to the release of flammable materials and ultimately a potential for a fire or an explosion. And then as we work our way further down the list, there's a lot of focus on management systems, maintenance, operations, management of change. This slide was actually put together for a facility in Europe, for a refinery. So it's always important to have that situational location. So for instance, topics such as security may be further down the priorities for a site in Europe, but may be higher for different parts of the world. So this effectively formulates the agenda for a risk engineering survey. So one part of risk engineering is about assessing a facility in terms of its management systems for its risk quality. Another important aspect is learning from losses. So what I've displayed here is some of the information that's available for categorizing losses. So losses are typically fires, explosions, property damage, and to group them into different causes and to group them into different occupancies. So as we see on the pie chart, refineries are responsible for 51% of the losses in the energy industry. Refineries face lots of challenges in terms of complicated processes, heating, reactions, high pressure, corrosive materials. And also they face challenges in that some of the refineries can be aging assets, they can be quite old. So there are some challenges there. Petrochemicals, more of a downstream function, so more processed materials, less risks from corrosion, let's say. And then we get into things such as tank farms and those type of occupancies, which are responsible for fewer losses. And then if we break those down further in terms of what are the causes of losses, on the pie chart, this can be broken down into 3 different categories. One is about mechanical failure. So this is inspection routines. This is due to losing material from the pipes. This is due to corrosion. It's due to leaks. This has been one of the leading causes of losses, but the industry has learned a lot of lessons and learned them kind of the hard way. They've improved upon inspection routines, measuring thicknesses of pipes, understanding corrosion mechanisms. And what we see now is that the leading causes of loss is operations. And within the insurance industry, this has been called operational competency. Are your operators competent? You know, are they applying good, sound management systems? And then the other leading cause is unsafe maintenance. Now, we could talk a long time about the causes of losses. That's a very big topic in itself. And I visit a lot of energy installations around the region, and I talk to people during the surveys, and I say, well, this could happen, or this could happen. And I think that a lot of the people think of me that I'm talking about Hollywood. Yeah, this is like big explosions, these types of things could happen. Well, in terms of an insurance panorama, when you write a lot of sites, when you have a big book of business, okay, these losses may not occur for individual sites, but certainly on a global panorama, the losses do occur and they happen reasonably frequently. So what I always like to do is to include some examples of losses whenever I speak to clients, just to bring it back home to say, look, this is what a bad day in the office looks like. This is what can happen. And this is what risk engineering is all about, is to try and prevent these type of loss events. So I've just put together a selection of losses. So, and the reason for this was to say, look, focus on some of the dates. These are all contemporary incidents. I don't necessarily know the causes of these losses, but it could be safe to say that there are no new losses. They're just losses that happen to new people, okay? So it's very much important that we continue to learn from losses. And as a minimum, as a risk engineer, we should take that oath to say we should try to avoid all previous losses. We should look to learn from all previous losses. So I know there's a mix of people in the room, so I try to give a selection of different types of losses for different types of occupancies, different locations. But the dates were of importance. So say these are all contemporary periods. I think this is about solid handling. So maybe not a large property loss, but there's potential there for a large business interruption loss. Same for cooling towers as well. So not a large property loss, but certainly a potential impact for business interruption. So the last one I wanted to show you. So this is a loss that occurred, a couple of years ago now, in 2019, for a refinery in the US. So the US is a highly regulated country. The high hazard industry is very highly regulated there. We all obviously know about management systems, learning from losses, control of hot works, isolations, taking plant out for maintenance, returning plant back from maintenance. But yet, in 2019, still a very significant loss that occurred. I did want to just show a brief video on this one, just to show is it possible to play the video? So it was just a very brief video, just 30 seconds or so, just showing this explosion. Just to bring it all back home to say, this is what risk engineering is about, this is what process safety is about, trying to prevent these types of losses. So this would represent the largest potential type of loss that can happen for this type of occupancy. So we talk about the estimated maximum loss, typically for refineries. This will be a vapor cloud explosion. So a release of highly volatile, we can take that off now. So it's from a journalistic source. The release of highly volatile vapor that finds an ignition source and then causes a large explosion. So again, this happened in 2019. So the industry is still learning from losses, and there's still improvements to be made. So this is all about the current situation. The next part of the presentation, I wanted to go a little bit further and I go more into the future. So the topic for the presentation is really looking forward into emerging risks. What can be impacting our industry going forward? What are the things that we need to be aware of? What are the growing trends? What are the things that are going to be on risk engineering survey agendas going forward? What are the topics that we need to make sure that we're covering? So I've put together a selection of topics. Yeah. Obviously, this is more out there. This is not grounded currently in the future. Look for some future present examples, but this is the future challenges that we'll be facing. So just grouping these things together then in some kind of emotive words about emerging risks, about transition, yeah? These are the type of words that we're hearing more and more about. Growth, change. And of course, sustainability. And these are all then packaged up into potential emerging risks that we will all face. There are lots of groups that are doing analysis of future trends, looking to say what are some of the challenges that we may face going forward. This is a slide from World Economic Forum on some of the global risks. What I like about this slide is that they're looking to quantify the size of risks, group them together into different trends, and also how they are interconnected. And what we can see in here, there are political risks, there is environmental challenges, there's social challenges, and what I wanted to break that down into is just some key themes that are a bit more bite-sized that we can look at. So, of course, global economic pressures, climate change, technology, and ultimately health and well-being. This is very much more of a growing trend amongst our people, wanting to work for organizations that are considering their well-being, you know, in terms of balancing their lives. So the climate change is happening. It certainly is occurring around us. We're living in a time where we're seeing a lot of change to the environment. We're seeing more freak storms more frequently. We're seeing flooding events. I saw a headline today to say that there were more flooding events in the last period than there had been over a certain course of history. So there's no doubt that climate change is happening and is occurring. How does this affect us within the energy industry? How does this affect us with inside insurance? What we're seeing is that environmental groups, government lobbyists are applying more pressure, not only on the operators to become more sustainable, to consider their future emissions, their future impacts, but also the companies, the industries that are supporting those industries as well, such as insurance. This is from an article in the US where, you know, obviously the US is often seen to be 10 years ahead of Europe, let's say. But this is where political lobbyists are applying pressure on insurance companies to say, are you an enabler for change? How are you supporting some of the climate agenda? And what this can all, for this example, this was for LNG terminals within the US, to say that they're facing more challenges in securing insurance. Because as a populace, people are saying that, well, is LNG, is fossil fuel something that we should be investing in going forward? And shouldn't more emphasis be put on renewable energies? And what this all ultimately relates to then is that there's potential for reduced capacity. Reduced capacity within inside the insurance market. Reduced appetite for wanting to underwrite energy risks. With a reduced pool of insurance, ultimately what those insurers will then be looking for is quality, good quality sites, sites that are very much mitigating risks, that are have a good risk quality. The next topic was about change. When I used to work in the UK, the chairman of the company where I used to work, he had a very good saying. He said that change is constant and it's happening all the time. And this is very true. The rate of change within human development over the last several years has been really eye-watering, the amount of change that's going on in the world. And of course, inside the energy industry, we're very much in the center of that change. Of course, I can't stand on stage and talk about change in technology without talking about AI. This is the change that we've seen in the last couple of years. So hands up anyone who's used ChatGPT. Keep your hands up if you think that you understand how it works. And this is the risk. This is a risk for sure. This is a technology that we're all adopting without necessarily understanding what sits behind it, how it works. Where is it strong? Where is it weak? At the moment, AI is limited to these large language models that are very data hungry, but we've seen big investment. There's been some development of those models, but we've seen big investment in terms of computer power, because that AI, although we talk about it of being quite advanced, it isn't very advanced at all, really. It's still quite dumb. It requires a lot of computing power. ChatGPT, for example, has read everything that has ever been published. It's read all of the internet, and it provides a model which tries to give you an autocomplete, tries to predict what you would like to say in the most efficient way. However, AI isn't a new topic. It's been around for decades. But as human beings, as organizations, corporations, as industry, we've been very much driven to look for efficiencies in AI. People are looking to adopt new tools, to be efficient, to be seen to be an innovative company. One example where I've seen companies begin to use AI is within the elements where AI is strong. So for processes that have a high data input, a lot of data for harvesting. For example, such as maintenance information. So information on the health of your equipment, vibrations on compressors, vibrations on pumps. So a lot of data. And then apply those large language model type tools with a lot of computing to try and predict what that signature vibration looks like, what those telltale signs from your equipment, for the benefit of being more efficient on your maintenance. And I think this is fine. I think this is the future. I think this is all the way we should be looking. But the risk is that we need to understand it. We need to understand where it's strong and where it's weak. And ultimately have people within inside our organizations who are very much leading us to say whether this is the right thing that we should be doing or not. When I worked in industry, for me, there was the risk that people were talking about was about copy-paste design. Yeah, so let's say we're designing a new gas plant, or we're designing a new refinery. Those designers have the temptation to apply a copy-paste. And then the concern is to say, well, what's the due diligence? What's the quality control? What's the review? We're letting computers kind of do this. Is it to say that one design, one size fits all? So that was the risk that I was aware of when I worked very much in industry. Now, if we're moving towards AI type design, build me the most efficient refinery, who within inside the organization knows how to ask it the challenging questions. Yeah, when things become so removed from human beings, where is the quality control? Another potential challenge that I'd like to talk to you about is about people. It's the old cliche, but people are our business, and that is very true. particularly within the energy industry. The energy industry is going to be facing lots of challenges. It's probably going to be one of the most challenging periods going forward that the industry has seen. And what we need inside the industry are people who are intelligent, passionate, and first and foremost, interested in this field as something they want to spend their career in. When I was at school, 30-something years ago, maybe longer, my teacher said to me, there's no point learning about fossil fuels. There's no point learning about oil and gas because there's only 30 years left. You can't base your career on that. And that was 30 years ago. Now I find myself a father, and my 7-year-old daughter, she's going through the schooling today, today's schooling. And because she's 7, she's getting to be a bit more inquisitive about the world. And, Daddy, when you go on these flights, when you go on holiday to these destinations, she thinks I go on holiday when I go traveling, and I try and tell her, no, it's a job. But she asks me, what do I do? And I tell my daughter, I work in oil and gas. Her jaw drops to the floor. Daddy, you're killing the oceans. And this is the product of the schooling that we have at the moment. She's going through this. This is what she's being taught. This is her reference points. So it's very important that we get the right people in the industry. And whenever I have worked inside the energy industry, we work pretty hard. We work pretty hard about reducing our emissions, whether it be to the air, to the water. Because as human beings, that's the right thing to do. So aging assets. As I said earlier, a lot of the assets out there, the refineries, those really important facilities that are providing us the fuels, the materials, the fertilizers for our economic sustainability and growth. These are aging assets. And it's important that at a government level, at a policy level, that we understand how long these assets are going to be required for. It's important that we know what level of investment is required. Are they going to be required for another 20 years? Are they going to be required for another 50 years? And how do we plan and maintain this equipment to ensure that it's fit for purpose for that period? Again, if we go back to insurance information, loss information, there is information available to say losses against the age of equipment. And what we see here is that when equipment is very new, when it's going through commissioning, when the first time it sees pressure, temperature, process fluids, it's prone to losses. These are known as infancy losses. Then, as the plant has been operating, maintained for a period of years, you see a lot lower amount of losses. This is because it's not being put under a lot of strain. And then obviously as the plants age, you get to see more random losses, more random failures. And it's not too much of a leap of faith to bring this further into this asset reliability bathtub curve that we're all used to. Whereas you see more losses as the equipment ages. So it's important that we know this and we plan for it. And like I say, it's often set by a government policy level to say, what are we looking to do as a country? And therefore, what are we looking to do as a company? How long do we need to run these assets for? I thought I'd include this slide about the energy mix. It's a very big topic in itself. Again, trying to predict the way of policies, governments, but also consumer behavior, consumer demand, consumer requirements. There are lots of these types of charts. Some of them may pan out to be correct, but they're all based on different assumptions. Assumptions around a faster uptake of renewable, or a faster uptake of new technologies, or there could be a slower uptake. There can be more local generation versus more transmission generation. But nevertheless, it's a big topic, and we see it more and more going forward. And then, of course, how does that relate back into our industries? As operators, as facility owners, we're looking for new fuels. We're looking for being more efficient. We're looking at potentially using hydrogen, for example, producing hydrogen over more traditional fuels. I brought in one example that I saw where operators for these types of pressures are looking to use hydrogen in lieu of natural gas for their steel making processes. And that's great. That's certainly a great, from an environmental point of view. But what about the risk quality? What about the potential risk impact of that facility? Has that now raised the risk profile of that facility by using hydrogen over traditional natural gas? And then, so in summary then, a few challenges going forward within the energy industry. Risk engineering is well positioned to consider these risks. Risks are not only born within inside the current operating positions, but also that drive to adopt more technology, to ensure that we have the right people, to ensure that we have the right level of investment, and ultimately to fight the big challenges of the day around sustainability and climate change. And I'd like to just leave a few moments for any questions you may have. So thank you.